Ooh. Chief reporting for chat. Not a good opening, but it's worth a try. I said last week that I was going to get us to my next AIT, which is down in Texas, but I'm going to get us there a little bit. But I also have a couple stories that I need to tell from Fort Devens yet. One of these involves Specialist White again. He had a vehicle, and we went off post briefly to do something one day, and I had the hat from the first movie Alien, the Nostromo hat. I had the old Nostromo patch, and it also had the leaf pattern that we called scrambled eggs on the hat. And he had a hat, I don't know what it was about, but his also had scrambled eggs on it. So we came back on post, and we came back through the back gate, which was manned. Like I said, when I first reported to Fort Devens back in January, the front gate was just wide open. You just drove onto the base, but the back gate was manned by MPs. So we were driving through the gate, and the sun was beating through the windshields, and we had the visors down. So the MPs saw the tops of our, or the brim of our hats, and they saw the scrambled eggs. Now, generally officers and high-ranking officers are the ones that have scrambled eggs on their hats. And I looked through all my caps that I own. I no longer have the Nostromo hat. It disappeared a long time ago, and none of my hats have scrambled eggs to show you a perfect example. So I think we had to show our IDs. I don't remember exactly what, but we got saluted because they saw this. They stopped us briefly. They, like I said, the sun was beating in. It was beating into our eyes. And the MPs are just looking through the window, the front window, and they saw me and they saw Richard, and we both had, like I said, hats with scrambled eggs on them. They saluted us on the post, and Richard's like, they saluted us on the post, and I looked over at him, and he looked over at me, and I said, oh, it's our hats. They thought we were officers. So we had a good laugh and all that. Another item on show and tell, I also mentioned last week that soldiers like to buy stuff for their rooms, you know, mostly boom boxes. And a few soldiers would buy rugs so they could have a rug to step on instead of the tile floor any time of the year. But of course those had to be put away for inspections. And me being the platoon sergeant, eventually I had to do some inspections once in a while of rooms. And we had one classmate, soldier or trainee, who looked like LeBeau. And I'm talking about LeBeau from Hogan's Heroes. They were about the same stature. They even looked a little bit similar. But when I told him that, he took offense to it. So I said, I just said you look like him. I wasn't going to call you LeBeau. Well, during one of my inspections, I noticed that he had purchased 3 rag rugs. Rag rugs back in that day and before were a product of mostly prisons at one time. That's how prisoners made money. They would get rags, lump them together, and then they would sell them. Well, he had purchased 3 of these things, and as I said, as soldiers so-called graduated, there was no ceremony. You just got your orders and you shipped out. And what you couldn't carry on your person most of the time, soldiers would throw away right and left. So I was digging through the trash after LeBeau left, and he had 3 of these. 3 of these rag rugs, and we're talking 1986. I still got all 3. They've been with me everywhere I've been. I've used them in 2 barracks and in all the houses that I lived in since I was in the military. And like I said, I still got them. So there's a little bit of show and tell, and I can't believe these are still holding up, because this is a rag rug. And I rarely see these for sale anymore. So it's kind of wondering where all the rags went. Check my notes, make sure I got all this. Yep, we did the scrambled eggs, and we did the rag rug, and a little bit of show and tell. And that's all I got really of Devens, not unless I can think of something else later on. But like I said, I flew the 4th of July weekend. Okay, this is my first time moving from one military post to another military post and having a ticket. You know, I had to go to travel section, and they said, where are you reporting to? And I said, of course, for Goodfellow, middle of Texas. They're like, okay, here's your ticket. Oh, And I'm like, oh, what? They're like, well, we can't get you straight there. And I said, okay. She says, you got to lay over in Dallas. Well, at that time, my brother lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I think I called them up and said, hey, I'll be in your area. I'm flying on the 2nd or the 3rd of July. And I said, I got to report to Goodfellow. He's like, okay, well, we'll come get you at the airport. And so they did. So I called, as soon as we got to his house, I called the new base. And I said, oh, by the way, I'm Specialist so-and-so. I said, I'm supposed to be reporting to you today. I said, I would like to extend that if possible. There I go, extending my leave. I already told you last week I was already in the hole. I haven't even earned a full year of leave yet. I'd already spent like 14 days and another 5 days, and now I'm spending a few extra days. And I said, I will report on, I think, Monday the 5th or something like that. And my brother said, well, we'll drive you down there. So, which was cool. So I got to spend the 4th of July weekend. And we went to downtown Dallas, and he took me around to where Kennedy was shot. And basically that's where the fireworks show was too that year. And because he worked somewhere near the place where the fireworks are being shot off. So I had an enjoyable weekend with my brother. It was nice. Hadn't seen him in a couple of years because he had been in Texas. I'd been in Colorado. The laughter in the background is my son. He's got his headphones on, so you know how it is. You got your headphones on, the louder you speak. I'm not going to start this video over again. So I spent the weekend. They drove me on Monday, or not Monday, but on the 5th of July. It could have been a Monday for all I remember. And I reported, and it was a drastic change. Like I said, at Fort Devens, I had the only platoon that had females in it, and they were on one half of the floor. Fort Devens was like a college dorm. You'd have maybe female roommates next door to you, across the hall from you. Didn't matter. We were almost equal in numbers, as opposed to where I just came from, where they were outnumbered 3 to 1s. Hence we had 3.5 platoons of males and a half platoon of females where I was at. Female soldiers, better say that. I might get in trouble with my old former black hat. Ha ha ha. So I reported in. Once again, I started taking leadership. I was supply corporal again. That lasted about a week or two. Then I was the squad leader. That lasted about a week or two. Then became the new A/. And I got to welcome the first drill sergeant. The Army at that time decided that the black hats were going to be phased out, and they were going to bring drill sergeants to all the schools. So all the AITs would have drill sergeants in charge of the trainees before they became soldiers. Don't know why they did it. I guess just felt like they needed more drill sergeants. So I got to welcome the first one. Can't remember his name, but he was of Spanish descent, I will say that. And he also lived in this local area, and he told me all the stories of how the Mexicans and how the transplanted Germans, he said we would have these wonderful feasts. We'd have German and Mexican food at all these events. You know, we had gatherings and all that. I mean, he told me about all the culture. I knew there were Germans in Texas, but I didn't realize that they were scattered throughout Texas, which was quite interesting. And of course, he tried to egg me on because we had to do the clearance, and I had my clearance finally at that time, and he didn't. So he kind of says, one day he pulled me in because I was A/. He says, tell me what you do at the schoolhouse. I said, I can't tell you that. He goes, oh, okay, I guess I'll have to wait for my clearance to catch up to me. So that's my introduction to Fort Goodfellow, out in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't believe they had a base out in the middle of nowhere, and it's still going strong, and it's still out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, currently I live in San Antonio. I think it's like a 3 or 4 hour drive. Haven't driven there yet. Of course, it's probably shorter than that if I speed or not speed, but I should go up there someday just to look at it. Don't know what else to say. I reported in. I started school right away, which was good. Won't have too many stories about school because, like again, once not much happened because I didn't have a vehicle, which really sucked in San Angelo, Texas, because any form of business was not within good walking distance from the base. But I have a lot of stories about the base because it's an Air Force base with a bunch of us Army guys on there. And I will talk about the confusion that the Army guys caused on an Air Force base. Not a post, not a fort. It was a pet base. And the Air Force kept ramming that down our throats over and over again. Some of my stories are going to be a little bit hilarious. I mean, I was part of a human fence. That's going to be an interesting story. One of my soldiers almost got taken into custody by the MPs during one of our fun little events that the Army did. I'll talk about that. I'll try to remember that story. And that's all I got for now. Hopefully I don't have any more from Fort Devens, but if I think of anything... Oh wait, one more thing from Fort Devens. Yes, and this regards my clearance. I was held over one day at Fort Dix for my clearance. Had to do some extra paperwork. And then I was able to catch up with everybody else in my room. But by that time they were already in a different platoon. And then at Fort Devens I got called. We always came back for lunch. I was still learning how to do Morse code at this time, and I got a message saying, you got to go to this person before you go back to the schoolhouse. Don't worry, you won't get in trouble for missing school. So I get up to the SSO, the Special Security Office, and I said, I'm here to report. They're like, oh yeah, the sergeant come over. I think this guy was in, I don't think he was in military, or I think he was in military attire, not civilian clothes like a lot of the guys who I talked to throughout my clearance. And he says, yeah, we're coming along pretty fine on your clearance. We're almost done. He says, but we come into a little bit of a problem. And I go, oh, really? He says, yeah. He says, well, he says, sit down. You know, here it is. He says, we got a report that you were observed on the 5th or the 6th of December. I can't remember the exact date. Should have looked at a calendar. I guess it really doesn't matter. 5th or 6th of December of 1985, snorting cocaine at a neighborhood party. I started laughing. He looked at me.
It's going to be the next...
He goes, why are you laughing? And I said, well, read that date again. He goes, okay. He said it was on the 5th or the 6th of December of 1985. I said, look at my records. I was at AIT in Fort Dix on that particular date. So he shuffles through a couple pages of my file and he goes, yeah, you're correct. He says, well, that solves that one. I knew who it was. It was a neighbor that really didn't like me. But I didn't care, but he tried to get me in trouble. I don't know why, but that's all I got. I think I got another story about my clearance, but I don't remember all the details right now. I'll have to really think about it. But it was kind of funny because the guy I talked to that day had no sense of humor. Yeah. So this is Chief. Left Fort Devens, did a little bit of show and tell, still got the rugs, I still appreciate them, they're in my kitchen. One's underneath by the sink, one by the stove, and one's by a counter. And so Chief out, see you next week, stay safe. And as I said, freedom is not free, hug a vet.